Hi, great to have everyone with us today. Sorry about being delayed today. We are live again from our BlendKit studio in Orlando, Florida. I'm Baiwen Chen, and with me today I have Sue Bauer and John Pizzo. Today is our second topical webinar session of BlendKit 2017. We're wrapping up Blend Week 2, Blended Interaction. And also joining us are our guest panelists, Alex McDaniel and Dr. Paige McDonald, from whom I will also introduce more formally in a moment. Let's take a few minutes to review a few awesome images representing us who are BlendKit 2017, or 1,300 and plus of us. Here are 3 photos featuring our participants attending BlendKit 2017 from Starbucks, from their home, and from a hospital. Thank you, Ed, Kathleen, and Audrey for sharing the photos with us. On the next slide, we see Sue, she is showing off her grading BlendKit 2017. And also we have a reflection picture from D. Lowe, and thank you for sharing. In the next slide, Crystal and Julie shared her BlendKit insights. So glad that you are finding BlendKit helpful. So please keep up with the great work and keep us updated as you explore BlendKit 2017. And before I move on to the next slide, I would like to mention that right now we have a few self-organizing online and local cohorts in BlendKit 2017. We have 5 local cohorts from the Open SUNY Code community, and we also have a few online cohorts, and you can see them in the discussion areas and also the student groups area. So we have one from the Coker College, we have one for the modern language instructors, and we have a discussion, an area for the faculty development, one for the K-12 instructors, we have one for the business non-academics, and also one for the class sizes discussions. So thank you for all the discussions and also the participation. We'd all love to see what you are seeing and what you are doing. Feel free to email a photo to blendkit@ucf.edu, and we would like to share photos with all the participants next week. So you can see on this slides, there is a link to the poll on the top of the page. Let's see how you are doing this week in terms of designing for meaningful student interactions in your blended learning course. So, as with last week, we will do this through 3 short polls. Remember, even if you are viewing the recording of this session, we still consider you as a participant. So please use the BlendKit 2017 Week 2 webinar participant input form to enter your poll responses and any input you might have. Wait until the session is over before hitting submit. You should be able to see all the other asynchronous responses and see how those compare to the poll responses shared in real time. First, while we've been considering interaction in blended courses this past week, we may each have very different beliefs about the value or effectiveness of interaction between students and instructor and among students. Let's look at poll question 1. In my blended course, I believe student interaction will be. The majority of you believe that student interactions are very important for student success in your blended course. Next, drilling down a little bit, what are the venues through which you plan to foster interaction between yourself and your students in your blended courses? If you have thoughts other than the ones listed here, select Other and enter your response. So, poll question number 2. In my blended course, I plan to foster student-to-instructor interaction using the number 1 method you plan to foster student-to-instructor interaction is face-to-face question and answer sessions, followed by emails, online questionnaires, comment forms, and video web conferencing tools. And the next slide, what are the venues through which you plan to foster interaction among students in your blended course? If you have thoughts other than the ones listed, select Other and enter your response. Poll question 3. In my blended course, I plan to foster student-to-student interaction using For student-to-student interaction, almost all participants plan to use online discussions in their blended courses. The other options that received more than half of the vote include both online and face-to-face collaborative activities and assignments and face-to-face discussions. Okay, great, and thanks again for your contributions. As we hear from our guest panelists today, please listen for their approaches to designing opportunities for interaction with and among students in their blended courses. We will start with the questions submitted via the Google form last week as the basis for a moderated mini panel discussion. During the discussion, please use the Q&A and window to post any clarifications you would like Alex and Paige to address. We will follow last week's format and try to get to the Q&A section at the end. If we run out of time, we will post their responses in the discussion area and open the post up for continued discussion. So let's get started. So let me first introduce our guests today, and Alex McDaniel and Dr. Paige McDonald. And Alex is a senior instructional designer at the Metropolitan State University of Denver, and Paige is an assistant professor at George Washington University. So thank you, Alex and Paige. We are going to start and take turns to answer questions from our BlendKit participants. I will start with Alex, and then Paige will provide her feedback right afterwards. So both of them will have time to answer each question. Let's start with question 1. The first question is, are there any specific instructor-to-student ratio for both fully online and hybrid courses? So, Alex, please. So I think Alex is muted.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
Perfect. So I love it when we start with an easy question because the answer is 3, right? The ratio is always 3. Well, except for it's not. The truth is there is no easy answer, and there is no specific instructor to student ratio that hits the golden number. And as we move forward with technology and we move forward with different modes of instruction, be it face-to-face, online, hybrid, synchronous, asynchronous, the instructor needs to become more of a conductor in an orchestra than a single instrument. And what this means is that despite the overall ratio, an instructor and a good course design is set up in such a way that it is never the entire course to one instructor. So let's say you have 30 students or 120 students inside of a course. Managing that many should be very rarely done directly by the instructor. A good course design is set up in such a way so that students will be pursuing heuristic kind of goals or self-actuating goals where they're actually moving on their own stuff. And then the instructor is acting as a solid resource for a select few students. And this could be done by structuring your instruction, your assessments, your activities in such a way that the bulk of students can work independent, and then students either online, synchronously or asynchronously or face-to-face, so that you're still getting that smaller interaction. So the specific ratio answer would be it varies depending on the instructional activity and resources that you're employing at the time, and wherever you can get to that smaller ratio, the better. And that comes from really planning out and really designing your course in such a way as to provide opportunities for specific learning interventions with smaller ratios.
Oh, thank you, Alex, for the suggestion. I agree with you. Planning is the key. So, Paige, do you have any feedback, any more suggestions?
Oh, I agree with Alex very much in that we often don't have any control over assigning the number of students in our course. So what we do have control over is how we organize them. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, and I don't know what that's from, but I'll try to keep talking even though I'm hearing myself. I think that the content the difficulty of the content level and the purpose of the interaction must be considered when you're thinking about how to form those groups. If you have 120, you can put them into groups of 10, and then you're moderating the group in some way, or you're acting as the facilitator. And I think it goes to the purpose of why you're having them interact. And I firmly agree with the comment that the instructor acts as a resource for certain students, because if you form smaller groups and you watch the interaction carefully, you can even be purposive in putting students who are doing well with students who might not be doing so well. And in this way, students can learn from one another as well as learning from the instructor.
Well, thank you so much for the suggestion. I agree with you. Small groups definitely is a great strategy for online and blended courses. Okay, let's move on to the second question. So question 2 is, in your opinion, which platforms, online or face-to-face, encourage more encouraging conversations between and among students, and why? So this one goes to Paige first.
So I'm going to say that we know that the interactions in face-to-face and online are different, and depending on whether or not you have a synchronous medium available for you in the online. We know that face-to-face discussions are more immediate, they can be more spontaneous, but if you facilitate it in a face-to-face classroom, you also know that there can be a few handful of students who can dominate the conversation. For that reason, I really appreciate the benefit of the asynchronous online discussions, because they allow all students to have a voice in the discussion, and every voice is read or heard from other students. There's one tool that I use, because we use Blackboard, is my students cannot see the postings of others until they have posted their own response. And this allows every student to have an equal voice, or they're not as influenced by other students. So I think that one other thing I wanted to say on this is the key to making a good online discussion is to make whatever question you have discursive. The online discussion shouldn't be something that is just used to see if students have familiarity with material. If you're going to have them discuss and you want interaction, the content or the question has to be such that people can respond back to one another and negotiate the meaning of the question. So that is one way to make the online discussion a little bit more meaningful.
Great, and that's a great suggestion, Paige. I agree with you. And designing great discussion question prompts is really important. Okay, so Alex, do you have any additional feedback?
I simply could not agree with Paige more. That was very well stated. One of my personal pet peeves, for many of you who know me, is the one post respond to two. And in my classroom, I've actually engaged face-to-face students where they'll make a comment and then they have to respond to two other people, and it becomes this really bizarre thing when you put it into physical interactions. Where some of these formula came from with engaging conversations kind of baffles me. So when we've moved into the online realm, the truth is when you're using discussions, that has to be the appropriate medium for what you're looking to do. Is this a formative assessment? Are you looking to gain understanding of the students? Is this a reflective activity? How does this align with the goals and performance objectives that you have outlined for the students? So in that, a discussion should not be, how was your day? Good. If it has a singular answer, that's not a discussion. That's simply a response, and that's different. Discussion needs to be designed in such a way as to really get to deeper levels of thought, have that reflection, have that ability for students to engage with each other. And this is, when we talk about interactions, there's student to student, student to course, and student to instructor. And you need to be very clear about what kind of interaction this is going to be and how this kind of engagement is. One area where I can see that there does become a problem is an expectation for students to have discussions and the instructor is absent. And that can create a feeling of kind of a runaway class or a runaway course, unless the discussion is designed in such a way as to realize this is really a pure moderated discussion where we're talking amongst ourselves. So setting up strong expectations and having a strong engagement level and a strong purpose for why you're communicating and engaging in conversation. Otherwise, it just becomes small talk about the weather.
Yeah, great suggestion. Yes, setting up expectations, setting up purpose, that's really important to facilitate successful online discussions. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. The third question is how to help weaker students to take active part in student interaction, especially when they feel they are behind others. So this one will go to Alex first.
So this is an area where you can really take advantage of some of the anonymity, being anonymous in the online environment. Students should never be made to feel singled out or alone, especially for any kind of um, lack of performance issues. So this is where you would certainly want to set up scenarios where you could get like-minded students or students who are performing in similar fashions together, and then use that sense of community to support each other and move forward. Specifically, how do you get them to be more active with student interaction is create environments where it's safe for them to do so. Create an environment where doing so benefits them. Remember, these are adult learners, and anytime they don't understand the reasoning behind the engagement or the interaction, it becomes busy work. And so there has to be a meaningful gain and a meaningful purpose that clearly aligns, again, with those learning and performance objectives for the course, so that it's not busy work, so that the adult learner immediately sees the benefit to that engagement.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And Paige, do you have anything to add to this, please?
Oh, I'm going to agree wholeheartedly. I think that creating a safe environment is essential so that all students feel like their participation is equally valued. One of the things that I use in my courses, especially in the higher level courses, which require us discussing controversial issues such as ethics and application in healthcare, is putting them in learning teams and I totally agree with Alex on the rationale being purposive on how you design those teams, whether you're looking for differentiation in thought or whether you're looking for people who will discuss things from similar perspectives. But if they work in these learning teams and group, they develop this sense of community over the course of the semester, and they hold one another accountable for interaction in the learning environment. And the faculty doesn't have to, so to speak, be the interaction police, because they're holding one another accountable. And I even have them sometimes do learning contracts on how they're going to assess one another's interaction and contribution to the learning goals. So I think that if you can keep groups the same, if that aligns with your pedagogical purpose, then that creates that sense of community in which they hold one another accountable.
Okay, thank you. And we just have a comment coming in from the participants, online participants, and one of them mentioned that in blended courses, particularly the asynchronous portion, the interaction is bridged to learn from and more from each other. So do you agree on that? And do you think it depends on the level, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, and also the subject matter? Since Paige, you just mentioned that you do it in your healthcare, your core subject matter, do you agree that the asynchronous portion would be beneficial for all different subject matter, for all different levels, or is it just for a certain group of students?
I do think that you have to consider the level of knowledge of the learner in any given topic. And for example, in undergraduate courses where students might have had a little bit of less experience, I think the faculty does play a larger role in guiding the responses to discussion questions to make sure that the students are not giving one another inappropriate information or inappropriate responses. So the faculty role may be to a greater extent in guiding the discussions at that level. And it also depends on what the purpose of your interaction is. So, for example, my upper level graduate course, the students have to do debates on controversial healthcare issues. And so this requires a great deal level of understanding and of knowledge prior to engaging in those debates. And so I let them struggle with that negotiation a bit, still providing guidance. So to answer your question, yes, it depends on the level of knowledge of the student of the content material and then the pedagogical goal for the interaction.
Oh, that's a great answer. So, let's now move on to question 4. I think today that's going to be our last question, and due to the limit of the time here. So question 4 is, and how can we encourage robust student-to-student and student-to-instructor interactions in our blended learning courses? So Paige, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'm going to go back to something Alex said in a previous question. I think this instructor has to be present. You know, when we talk about the instructor has to be present for that social purpose, but also for that cognitive. And the students, if they feel they're too much self-direction in the learning process and they're not getting that feedback from the instructor, they're going to be absent as well. So I think that's a very important thing. And I think going back to your instructional design, if you have that alignment between your learning goals and the types of interactivity that you're fostering, whether it be debate on a topic and controversial issue, whether it be group problem solving to come up with a case description, if your pedagogical goals align and students can see how what they're doing relates to what they're supposed to be learning, I think they will be actively engaged.
Well, great. Thank you. Can you give your thoughts, Alex, please?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree again with Paige more. This is where, you know, people by nature in general are community builders. They want that engagement. More often, when you find a lack of engagement, it's due to poor design actually interfering with it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in a one-room schoolhouse or in a robust, you know, 18,000 person online MOOC. People pass notes. They want to engage with each other. And so it comes down to the design of the course, the design and the intentionality of how you are creating, fostering, and encouraging those interactions. But specifically, if you are dealing with adult learners, they can be very selfish in what they're doing, and it has to show a clear benefit. Mm-hmm. If it's forced interaction so that I, as an instructor, can assess whether or not you are engaged, that's not necessarily the right kind of interaction, specifically for student to student or student to instructor. There needs to be a direct benefit for the learner that is clear and identifiable and helps them achieve the clearly established alignment of goals.
Yep, and thank you, Alex and Paige. And I really agree with you. And the goals and the objectives and alignment is definitely the key. And this really brings us back to the blueprint assignment that most of you have just submitted in week 1. That is where you set up the foundation for your course design and setting up your goals and objectives, and also setting up the relevant activities and assignments. So I am going to now turn it over to Sue. And Sue, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just had to wait a second for my mic to start working. Thank you so much. I want to thank especially Laura and Hector. They were able to post a couple questions. I'm going to address Laura's question real quick. She was mentioning that Blackboard is not the only learning management system which allows a forum post well, where a student has to post before they can see the other postings. And she mentioned also that Piazza is helpful for anonymous asynchronous Q&A. Do either of you have any experience with that? Alex or Paige?
I do not.
Okay.
I have not used Piazza.
All right.
I have, and actually there's a multitude. There's plugins for Moodle and for Sakai. There's a multitude of it. And one of the things that I would caution is structuring the question. A lot of times that tool is, in my experience, abused in such a way as to ask a very limited question with a very finite answer, and then kind of that forced interaction that happens after you respond to a question and then you see each other's answers. It's better to look at a design and say, how can this be really an organic conversation that people are really going into, and that I'm not looking to use this as some kind of assessment as to engagement, but to understanding, which is the ultimate goal of conversations. So the tool set aside, design is the most critical element when moving into these kind of interactions.
Okay, great. Well, that closes out our guest panels today. Thank you both, Alex and Paige, for your time. We did have another question post, and so we will try to go ahead and get that answered for them offline and post that back into the discussion area. Like I said, Bywin and I will try to compile that. If you do come up with a question or think of something you want to ask after we have signed off, please feel free to reach out to us in an email, and we'll make sure that we get Alex and Paige any follow-up questions that you have. So thank you again, Alex and Paige. We appreciate your time today and your expertise. I think there's a reason why you were each agreeing with each other, and that's because of the answers that you were giving. So again, thank you so much for your expertise and especially your time today to share that with our participants. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on to housekeeping. As we wrap up today's webinar, let's go ahead and touch base on a few of our housekeeping items. Let's talk about excuse me, accessing the course. Make sure you use the modules on the left section of your course page to view all the materials for each week. Remember that after our webinar today, we are going to start week 3. Remember that interaction with us in the course can occur through the mail and the discussion area, and then you'll be interacting with the content externally. And remember, the content's held externally from the Canvas course, so that way once the course is closed, you'll still have ability to access all those resources. It's a little confusing during week 1 and week 2, but usually around week 3 you kind of get the gist of it and you know where you're headed. But just to clarify that for this week. We are still sending out badges. We are using Credly to deliver our badges. If you found badges under your profile link in the course, you will not actually see the Credly badges there. The badges link is for the internal Canvas badges tool that was developed after we started using Credly. We also had a DIY issue with some of the badges this week going out for that activity, so please be patient with us. We are following up with that, and we will make sure that the badges that need to go out will definitely go out to participants that have earned them. So again, we're aware of the issue and we are working on that. Bywin and I can't believe it, but we're pretty much caught up with the bulk of the week 1 activities, and we've been trying to keep up with our week 2 activities that have been coming into grade. Just remember that this is the end of week 2 right now, so we are still receiving quite a few items, and we will continue to keep up with weeks 1 and 2, and then start on week 3 as soon as we can. Again, thank you for your patience with that. We really appreciate the fact that you're contributing and submitting, and we will get feedback to you as soon as we can. Again, communicating with us, you can do so by using the inbox area. As you can see here on the screen, you'll be able to send and receive communication from us here. So again, please send us your questions if you have issues or troubles with anything, or just want some feedback. Please feel free to use that inbox tool. Also, just a little bit of a plug for those of you interested in blended learning. The OLC Innovate Conference is coming up in New Orleans this year. It'll be from April 5th to 7th. Formerly, there were 2 conferences. One was called the Blended Learning Workshop, and then there was another called the Emerging Technologies Conference. So these 2 conferences have been combined into one conference, and it is now called Innovate. So both face-to-face and virtual attendance are available for that. Members from the BlendKit2017, including myself, will be at that conference. So if you're planning to attend, please let us know. We'd love to connect with you there and actually meet face-to-face if at all possible. All right. Thank you, as always, for taking time to provide feedback. I know it gets a little tedious and a little repetition from week to week, but we really do take the time to look at the feedback and do what we can to make sure that we're listening to the issues that you have or the kudos that you have. And we solicit that and we feed that back to one another. So if one of us is checking it, we make sure that we give the feedback to the other. So again, just a little couple things about our feedback this week. Some of you said that there were broken links on the reading materials, so thank you for letting us know that. We try to keep up to date with those, I think, daily, but it's a never-ending project, so please send those to us as soon as you see them, and we will fix those when we can. Somebody asked, do I have to blog, or can I just kind of see what others are doing? And absolutely, read away. You do not have to do any of the activities. Remember that this is your choice, your selection for your interaction and activity activity in this MOOC. Some of you had troubles with the DIY documents. I know I had trouble viewing some on my end, and some of you had troubles editing and editing and submitting on your end. The most of those were worked out throughout the week, so again, we thank you for your patience on that. We will give comments or feedback if we can't read something. I actually needed to do an update, which I was not aware of, so once I did that, everything was good to go and we could see things. So there'll be little bugs, but again, we appreciate your patience as we go through that. All right, remember again, submitting your DIY is optional and there is no real due date. We're trying to keep with tentative due dates just for the grading and to kind of keep within the frame or schedule of the course. But if you don't get to week 1 and 2 until this week, please feel free to kind of plug through those and submit those. We will get back to that. And again, we will try to keep up with grading even when we come back to get some of those that have been submitted maybe a little bit late. All right, so readings for weeks 3 and 4 are now available. The discussions are there. Remember that you can create your own. We presently have a couple of discussions that have been created by you, so that's great. How are you blending K through 12? We'd love to see you interacting there. And the faculty professional development. We love to see you guys in there talking and discussing. So good job creating that, and we love to see that. Remember, social networking. Participation on that is up to you. I tried to snap a quick picture of me this week as I was plugging through the grade book and trying to catch up with some of the DIYs. But I don't want to look at my own face, so I'm really going to promote that some of you get out there and take some pictures and show us what you're doing and how you're blending. All right, the feedback form. If you haven't yet completed the week 2 feedback form, we really can't stress enough the importance of your feedback. As I mentioned previously, this is an open course and it's always a work in progress. And so it's by far perfect. And for that, we do appreciate your feedback. Some of the feedback that I got from the week 2 form talks about your engagement. You said that most of you were engaged this week with the readings and the webinars. You also said it took about 1 to 3 hours to complete your activities for the week. We asked what you got from the reading or what your takeaway was, and I think most of you said that it was exciting to read about the different types of interaction and then to work on your DIY activities for how you're going to promote those interactions to occur. The DIY, some of you liked the sample files. You said they were great to kind of have those sample files as a resource, but some of you said it was a bit confusing in those directions for what to complete. Again, if you have any questions or are confused, please let us know. I'm sure that you are not the only one out of thousands that had that question. So please let us know what you're having trouble with, and we'll make sure to assist you with that. One of your barriers this week, time commitment. You know, when it's a MOOC and we sit there and tell you the due dates are kind of wishy-washy, it's hard for you to stick to it. So I think we said one of the strategies in the first seminar was just to allot time for it, make sure it happens. Facilitator and participation interaction. People said they were neither connected or disconnected, and we really want to make sure that you feel that we're interacting with you. So again, on those DIY projects, we're going to try to give you some feedback. And again, in the inbox, please feel free to communicate with us. As far as deadlines, again, we said they're kind of tentative. However, April 3rd is the cutoff date. So those are when things need to be submitted. We do give you a little bit of time for some makeup in that window, but I would go ahead and keep in your head that April 3rd date, just so that you know that way if we give you any feedback and we want anything resubmitted, that gives you that time afterwards to kind of do that. All right, in next week's webinar, we're going to be joined by Alex McDaniel and Stephen Crawford from Arizona State, and so we hope you can join us for that seminar. We'd also like to go over the module for week 3. Just remember that we're going to pause a moment to see if there's any questions. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So as you can see here, we've got week 3 up. You're going to want to work through all the activities located under the week 3 blended assessments of learning heading. Remember, the modules area is kind of the hub that takes you internally to activities and externally to content. So try to start in the modules area for the week. And again, our focus this week will be on blended assessments of learning. All right. Well, thank you very much for your participation in today's session. And thank you again to our guest speakers, Alex and Paige. And of course, as always, John Pizzo sure earned his keep today. We had some sound issues, so we thank you for your patience and your expertise to get us up and running this afternoon. Always remember that by when Linda and Kelvin and I are available to support you on your journey, please don't hesitate to email us for assistance. This is your course, and this is our learning community. At this time, we'd like to say goodbye from the BlendKit 2017 studios here in Orlando. We hope you have a wonderful week and keep the posts coming.